Self-respect is not just about confidence or knowing your worth. It is about enforcing boundaries that protect your peace, energy, and emotional well-being. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define what is acceptable and what is not, what you will tolerate and what you refuse to entertain. Without them, you invite chaos, disrespect, and one-sided relationships into your life. People will take as much as you allow them to, and if you do not set limits, they will assume there are no. Having boundaries is not about shutting people out or being cold. It is about ensuring that the relationships in your life are healthy, balanced, and respectful. It is about making it clear that you are not available for mistreatment, manipulation, or inconsistency. Too often, people avoid setting boundaries because they fear they will lose relationships. They worry that saying no will push people away, that demanding respect will make them seem difficult. But the truth is, the right people will respect your boundaries, and the wrong ones will expose themselves the moment you enforce them. When you lack boundaries, you leave yourself open to being used, overlooked, and taken for granted. You become the person who always says yes, who stretches themselves thin, who sacrifices their own needs just to keep others happy. And while it may seem noble, it is actually a form of self-betrayal. You cannot expect others to value you if you do not first value yourself enough to set limits. When you constantly prioritize others at your own expense, you teach people that your time, energy, and emotions are up for negotiation, but they are not. Self-respect demands that you communicate what is and isn't acceptable. It means saying no when something doesn't align with your values. It means refusing to engage in toxic relationships, even if it means walking away from people you once cared about. It means recognizing that your time is valuable and should not be wasted on those who do not reciprocate your effort. Some people will not take your boundaries well. They will push back, call you selfish, accuse you of being too sensitive or too rigid, but that is only because they benefited from your lack of boundaries. The ones who truly respect you will understand that your limits are not about control or manipulation. They will not guilt you for demanding respect. They will not disappear the moment you stop overextending yourself. Instead, they will adjust because they know your presence in their life is not an entitlement but a privilege. Boundaries also apply to yourself. Self-respect means holding yourself accountable for the way you allow others to treat you. It means recognizing when you are making excuses for bad behavior, when you are accepting less than what you deserve, when you are tolerating things that go against your values. It is not enough to set boundaries. You have to enforce them. Because a boundary without consequences is just a suggestion. People will test your boundaries. They will see how much they can get away with. They will push to see if you truly mean what you say. That is why self-respect is so important. It gives you the strength to stand firm. It reminds you that walking away from situations that do not serve you is not a loss. It is a gain. It is a gain in peace, in self-worth, in emotional security. When you prioritize self-respect, you stop seeking validation from others. You stop begging for attention, for love, for consideration. You realize that you do not have to prove your worth to anyone. The right people will see it, and the wrong ones will leave when they can no longer take advantage of you. And that is exactly how it should be. At the end of the day, boundaries are a reflection of how much you respect yourself. They are a declaration of self-worth, a commitment to your own well-being. And when you stand firm in them, you send a clear message to the world. I know who I am, I know what I deserve, and I will not settle for anything less. You were never free, you were priceless, but the world has a way of making you forget that. It convinces you that in order to be loved, to be chosen, to be appreciated, you must make yourself endlessly available. You must be accommodating, forgiving, understanding. You must give without hesitation, compromise without question, and lower your standards just to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. And so you offer your time, your love, your energy without ever stopping to ask if the people around you have truly earned it. You hand yourself over like an open book, thinking that if you just give enough, if you just prove yourself worthy, they will see your value. But here's the truth. Things that come easy are rarely cherished. People do not value what they do not have to work for. When something is given freely, without expectation, without boundaries, it becomes ordinary in their eyes, not because it lacks worth, but because they never had to earn it. And that is how you end up being taken for granted. Not because you are not enough, but because you have made yourself too accessible to those who never deserved you in the first place. You were never meant to be an afterthought, an option, or a convenience. You were meant to be valued, to be chosen, to be appreciated in a way that is consistent and intentional. But for that to happen, you must first recognize your own worth. You must stop giving yourself to people who only know how to take. You must stop settling for relationships, friendships, and connections that require you to shrink yourself just to fit. You must stop believing that love requires sacrifice, when in reality, love should be a balance of giving and receiving. The world will tell you that you must be easy to love, that you must not ask for too much, that you must not be difficult, that you must be grateful for whatever affection or attention you receive. But that is a lie designed to keep you small, to keep you in a cycle where you accept less than what you truly deserve. The reality is, the right people will never make you feel like you are asking for too much. The ones who truly see your worth will never need to be convinced to treat you with respect, effort, and care. You are not a discount, a bargain, or something to be handed out freely to whoever asks. You are not something that can be replaced, exchanged, or overlooked without consequence. You are rare, and rare things are not given away. They are earned, they are sought after, they are treated with care, because those who recognize their value understand what a privilege it is to have them. But recognizing that within yourself is where the shift happens. It is when you stop begging for attention, for consistency, for love that is freely given elsewhere. It is when you stop explaining why you deserve effort. It is when you stop chasing people who never had the intention of staying. Because you were never meant to chase. You were meant to attract. And the only way to do that is to stand firm in your worth, to know that you were never free, never ordinary, never something to be taken lightly. You were always priceless. The ones who fail to see that will lose you, and that is their loss, not yours, because at the end of the day, you are not missing out on anything by walking away from those who could not appreciate you. They, however, are losing something they will never find again, and one day they will realize it. They will remember the way you cared, the way you gave, the way you poured into them with all the love in your heart, and when they do, it will be too late, because by then you will have moved on to a life where your worth is not questioned, where your presence is not taken for granted, where you are treated as the priceless person you have always been. Absence has a way of speaking louder than words ever could. It forces people to confront the void they never thought they'd have to face, to feel the weight of what they once had but failed to cherish. The truth is, people rarely realize the value of something when it is constantly within reach. It is human nature to become desensitized to what is always available, to overlook the effort that goes into the things they take for granted. But the moment something is no longer there, when the calls go unanswered, the doors remain closed, and the warmth they once depended on is suddenly gone, that is when reality sets in. That is when they start to understand the cost of what they lost. Absence teaches a lesson that words never can. You can explain your feelings 100 times. You can ask for respect. You can beg for appreciation. You can remind someone over and over again that you deserve more. But as long as you are still present, as long as you are still giving, they will continue to assume that you will always be there. They will hear you, but they won't listen. They will acknowledge your words, but they won't feel them, because nothing about the situation has changed. The only thing that truly forces change is when your absence becomes undeniable, when the comfort they relied on is no longer theirs to access. That is when they truly begin to understand. People only start questioning their actions when they are faced with the consequences of them. As long as you continue to show up, despite being overlooked, as long as you continue to tolerate being treated as an option, as long as you keep accepting less than what you deserve, there is no urgency for them to change. They assume that no matter what they do, no matter how little effort they put in, you will still be there. That is why sometimes the only way to make someone understand your worth is to remove yourself entirely, to stop being available to them, to let them feel the difference between having you in their life and losing you. Absence forces people to remember. It makes them replay the moments they brushed aside, the things they dismissed, the times they didn't think twice about the effort you put in. They start to see all the little things they overlooked, the messages you sent just to check in, the way you always made time for them, the way you gave without ever expecting anything in return. And suddenly, all those things they once took for granted become painfully clear. The space you left behind becomes impossible to ignore. It is in your absence that people begin to realize just how much space you occupied in their lives. They start to notice the silence where your laughter used to be, the emptiness where your energy once filled the room. They reach for their phone to call you only to remember that you are no longer an option. They make plans and instinctively think of inviting you only to realize that they lost that privilege. And that is when regret sets in. That is when they finally understand that what they thought was permanent was actually fragile, that what they assumed was unconditional had limits, that the person they believed would always be there has now moved on. But absence isn't about playing games or seeking revenge. It's not about punishing someone or making them suffer. It's about showing them in the most undeniable way that you were never a guarantee, that your presence was not a right but a privilege, that you are not something to be used and discarded at their convenience. It is about reclaiming your power, about proving to yourself that you do not need to be where you are not valued. It is about teaching the lesson that words could never convey, that once you decide to walk away, there is no going back. The most powerful thing you can do when someone takes you for granted is to give them the opportunity to experience life without you. Not to hurt them, but to remind them of what they failed to appreciate. Because in the end, absence doesn't just teach them a lesson, it teaches you one too. It teaches you that you are not defined by the way others treat you, that your worth does not decrease because someone else failed to see it. And most importantly, it teaches you that sometimes the best way to be valued is to leave. Walking away from one-sided effort is not an act of weakness, it is an act of self-respect. Too often we find ourselves in situations where we give more than we receive, where we invest time, energy, and love into people who barely meet us halfway. We convince ourselves that if we just try harder, if we just give them a little more time, they will eventually see our value and reciprocate our effort. But the truth is, if someone truly values you, they won't need to be convinced to match your energy. They will do it naturally. One-sided effort is exhausting. It drains you emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. You find yourself constantly reaching out, making plans, checking in, being the one to initiate conversations, offering support and showing up, only to receive inconsistency in return. And yet, you make excuses for them. You tell yourself that they're just busy, that they don't express love the way you do, that maybe they just need more time to realize how much you care. But deep down, you know the truth. If they wanted to, they would. If they truly valued you, you wouldn't have to beg for their attention, their respect, or their effort. Walking away is not easy. It's difficult to accept that someone you care about doesn't feel the same way. It's painful to realize that the relationship, friendship, or connection you fought so hard for was never meant to last. But staying in a dynamic where you are the only one trying is far more painful in the long run. Because the longer you stay, the more you lose yourself. You begin to question your worth. You start to wonder if you are expecting too much, if you are being too demanding, if you should just settle for whatever they are willing to give. But love, friendship, and respect are not things you should have to negotiate. They should be freely given, not forced. People will take as much as you allow them to. If you keep giving without ever demanding reciprocity, they will continue to expect it. If you never set boundaries, they will assume you don't have any, and if you continue to tolerate half-hearted effort, they will believe that's all they ever need to give. That's why walking away is necessary. It is a statement that says, I deserve better. It is an act of reclaiming your self-worth, of choosing yourself over a situation that only depletes you. Some people will try to convince you that leaving is selfish, that you should be more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. But the reality is you cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot continue to give and give without ever receiving anything in return. It is not selfish to want to be valued. It is not unreasonable to expect effort from the people you care about. A relationship, whether romantic or platonic, should never feel like a one-person job. It should be mutual. It should feel balanced. It should not leave you feeling unappreciated, unseen, or alone. When you walk away from one-sided effort, you make room for the kind of connections that will actually fulfill you. You open the door to people who will see your worth without you having to prove it. You allow yourself the space to receive the same love and energy that you so freely give to others. Because the right people, the ones who truly deserve you, will never make you question whether you matter to them. They will show you in their actions, in their consistency, in the way they prioritize you without you having to ask. Letting go of one-sided effort is not about being bitter or holding grudges. It is about realizing that you deserve more and refusing to settle for anything less. It is about choosing yourself in a world that often teaches you to put others first. It is about understanding that the right people will never make you feel like you have to beg for their presence. And once you fully embrace that truth, walking away no longer feels like a loss. It feels like freedom. You see, confidence isn't arrogance. It's knowing your value without waiting for someone else to validate it. It's walking into a room and not shrinking to make others comfortable. It's choosing yourself even when people expect you to settle for less. Because if you don't set the standard for how you should be treated, someone else will. And trust me, they'll place you far lower than you deserve. People will only treat you at the level you demand. If you constantly say yes to last-minute plans, they'll never prioritize you. If you continue to show up for someone who disappears when you need them, they'll never think twice about leaving. If you keep excusing bad behavior, they'll never feel the need to change. And that's not their fault. It's human nature. We respect what we have to earn, not what is given freely without effort. So let's be clear, your presence is a privilege, your energy is rare, your love is a gift. And if someone can see that, if they believe they can mistreat you and you'll still be there, then you need to step back and let them experience life without you. Because sometimes people don't learn the value of what they have until it's no longer within reach. Teaching your worth isn't about revenge or proving a point. It's about setting the tone for how you want to exist in this world. It's about refusing to be anyone's afterthought. It's about recognizing that you were never meant to chase real connections, real respect, real love should never require you to beg. And if it does, then it isn't real. People love to tell you that you're too much when they're unwilling to rise to your level. They'll say you expect too much, that you need to be more flexible, more understanding, more forgiving. But let's be honest. Those same people would never tolerate being treated the way they treat you. They wouldn't last a day in your shoes. Giving without receiving, loving without being valued, showing up without recognition. So why should you? Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Knowing your worth isn't about looking down on others. It's about refusing to lower yourself just to be accepted. It's about making it clear that you are not available for relationships, friendships, or situationships that drain you. It's about walking away the moment you realize that someone is only there for what you can offer and not for who you truly are. There is power in choosing yourself. There is strength in saying no. There is confidence in knowing that you deserve more. And the sooner you step into that power, the sooner you will see the world shift around you. Because when you know your worth, you don't have to chase what is meant for you, will recognize your value and never make you question it. Being taken for granted doesn't happen overnight. It's never one big moment where you suddenly realize that someone has stopped valuing you. No, it's a slow, silent process, a habit that builds over time, one small moment at a time. It starts with little things, a message left unanswered, a promise broken without a second thought, a favor expected instead of appreciated. You brush it off at first, telling yourself it's nothing, that maybe they were busy, that maybe they just forgot. But then it happens again and again, until one day you wake up and realize you are no longer being considered, no longer being prioritized, no longer being seen the way you once were. It happens because people adjust to the love you give them. They become accustomed to your generosity, your kindness, your willingness to always be there. They assume you will always pick up the phone, always rearrange your plans, always put their needs ahead of your own. And because you don't complain, because you keep showing up, they stop appreciating it. It's human nature to take what is consistently available for granted. It's not always intentional. Sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it. But whether they mean to or not, the result is the same. You are left feeling unseen, undervalued, and exhausted from pouring into people who never think to pour back into you. It's easy to blame them, to think, how could they not see what they're doing? But the truth is, it's not just about them. It's also about what you allow. When you continuously tolerate being overlooked, You teach others that it's acceptable. When you keep giving without expecting anything in return, you show them that your love, time, and energy come without conditions. And when you never set boundaries, people assume there are none. That's why being taken for granted isn't just something that happens to you. It's a pattern that forms because somewhere along the way you forgot to demand more. But here's the thing, real love, real respect, real appreciation should never have to be begged for. If someone only values you when you're gone, that means they never truly valued you in the first place. They only valued what you did for them. And that's the difference between genuine connection and convenience. Because people who truly appreciate you won't need to lose you to realize what they had. They will make sure you know it every single day. The habit of taking someone for granted starts small, but it can grow into something toxic if you don't address it. It can leave you questioning your worth, wondering if you're asking for too much, when in reality you've been settling for far too little. And the longer you stay in that cycle, the harder it becomes to break free. You start convincing yourself that this is just the way things are, that this is what love or friendship or loyalty looks like. But deep down, you know it's not. You know that love should feel reciprocated, that friendships should feel balanced, that your presence should be cherished, not expected. The hardest truth to accept is that people don't change unless they have a reason to. If they've grown used to you always being there, why would they think anything needs to change? That's why sometimes the only way to break the habit of being taken for granted is to remove yourself from the equation, not as a test, not as a game, but as a statement that says, I will no longer be in spaces where I am not valued. Because once you do that, once you stop overextending yourself for those who wouldn't do the same for you, you force people to either step up or step out of your life. And either way, you win. You win because you're no longer settling for less than you deserve. You win because you've reclaimed your time, your energy, and your self-respect. And most importantly, you win because you've broken the cycle. You've stopped allowing yourself to be part of a habit that should have never formed in the first place. And from that moment on, the people in your life will know you are not someone who can be taken for granted. Not now, not ever. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this loud and clear. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Too often, we give and give, thinking that love, respect, and appreciation will naturally follow. But what happens when they don't? When your kindness is mistaken for weakness, when your patience is stretched thin, but no one stops to ask, are you okay? That's when you must step back, straighten your crown, and remind the world who you are. You see, being taken for granted doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow erosion, a habit that forms when you keep showing up even when you're unappreciated, when your sacrifices become expected. But here's the truth. You are not a convenience. You are not a backup plan. You are not an afterthought. And so you must teach the cost of your absence, because nothing wakes people up faster than the realization that what they thought was theirs to misuse is gone. Walk away from unreciprocated energy. Protect your peace like it's the most expensive thing you own, because it is. And when you choose yourself, when you refuse to settle, when you say, I will not be undervalued, that is when respect is either given or lost forever. So let them learn, let them feel the silence where your voice used to be. Let them wonder why the sun doesn't shine so bright anymore. And let them understand taking you for granted was the most expensive mistake they ever made. There comes a time in life when you have to stop explaining yourself to people who never truly listen, when you have to stop bending over backward for those who don't value the effort you put in. Because here's the truth. Your worth is not up for discussion, negotiation, or debate. It simply is. And anyone who fails to see it doesn't deserve a seat at your table. The problem with people who take you for granted is that they assume your kindness is endless. They believe your patience will stretch forever, that your love will always be available, that your energy will always be given freely. They don't question whether you're tired, whether you need the same support you give, whether you feel seen, heard, or appreciated. And the moment you allow this cycle to continue, it becomes a silent agreement, a contract you never signed, but somehow got stuck in. But you are not a discount. You are not a limited time offer that someone can access whenever it suits them. You are not a maybe or a plan B. You are the prize. And the moment you start seeing yourself that way, the world has no choice but to adjust.